Welcome to this deep dive. We've got you right here with us in the room as we navigate the rapidly evolving world of global climate finance.
Yeah, it is a massive and really fast-moving topic today.
Right. And we're tracking the huge agreements moving from COP29 in Baku all the way to COP30 in Belém. We're using a really detailed analytical essay for this. It's titled From Baku to Belém, The Road to $300 Billion.
Which is just a staggering number to try and wrap your head around.
It really is. So our mission today is to figure out if this massive new climate pact is a genuine lifeline for developing countries, or, if it's just a complex financial mirage. Okay, let's unpack this.
Well, the real fulcrum of all this is the November 2024 summit in Baku. That is where they established the new collective quantified goal.
The NCQG.
Right, the NCQG. And the headline there is that developed countries are targeting $300 billion annually by 2035 to mobilize climate finance.
And that formally replaces the old $100 billion pledge, right? The one that was widely criticized for just chronically missing the mark.
Exactly. But that 300 billion figure gets all the headlines, while the underlying Baku to Belém Roadmap is aiming at a much wider target. The ultimate goal is actually scaling total international climate finance to $1.3 trillion annually.
Wow, $1.3 trillion.
Right.
That gap between $300 billion and $1.3 trillion is huge. And it's really what's driving the polarization we're seeing in the source material.
Oh, absolutely. And just to impartially report on the reactions here, developed nations have praised the initial 300 billion baseline as an economically realistic stepping stone.
But on the flip side, civil society groups, global south nations, and specifically India, heavily criticize the agreement.
Yeah, they argue it's an inadequate political compromise, one that essentially sidesteps the historical emissions responsibility of wealthier nations.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because it is so tempting to just view this $300 billion as direct public cash grants.
But it's not. What's fascinating here is that the fine print legally counts financial flows mobilized through multilateral development banks, private investments, and various non-loan mechanisms.
So instead of direct treasury transfers, we're looking at some seriously complex financial engineering.
Exactly. A multilateral development bank might use a small amount of public money to absorb the initial risk on a green infrastructure project,
which then incentivizes private investors to bring in the bulk of the actual capital.
Precisely. It's a blended approach.
And that leads straight into what the essay identifies as the debt trap. Because the agreement lacks binding commitments for debt forgiveness, there is a severe risk here.
A huge risk.
Vulnerable economies might take on crippling loans that are basically disguised as climate aid.
That's the real irony of this entire structure. If this finance arrives mostly as interest-bearing loans rather than actual grants, sovereign nations trying to fortify themselves against environmental disaster could inadvertently trigger their own financial ruin.
They are essentially forced to leverage their economic future just to survive the present. So what does this all mean? Why does this matter to you listening right now?
Well, it ties directly into global supply chains and overall economic stability.
Right. Look at the specific examples of frontline devastation. We're talking severe droughts ravaging the Horn of Africa.
Destructive cyclones wiping out infrastructure in the Pacific.
And totally unpredictable monsoons destabilizing South Asia. These abstract financial mechanics become immediate life-or-death realities.
Which is exactly why Belém placed such heavy emphasis on pivoting toward adaptation finance. The goal is to triple the funding specifically allocated for adaptation.
Things like engineering physical flood defenses.
Right, or overhauling municipal water systems, deploying drought-resistant crops. It fundamentally ties back to Article 2.1c of the Paris Agreement.
That's the specific legal mandate requiring all global financial flows to be consistent with low greenhouse gas emissions and climate-resilient development.
Exactly. It's about aligning every dollar with survival.
To pull this together for you, the roadmap from Baku to Belém undeniably shifts the global community from empty rhetoric to concrete financial frameworks. Establishing that $300 billion floor is a substantial systemic shift.
Yet the history of unmet pledges means the delivery risks and the structural conditionality of these funds are under intense scrutiny.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the ultimate success of this pact won't be measured by inked pages or sophisticated financial vehicles.
No, it's going to be measured by transformed infrastructure, stabilized sovereign debt, and actual physical resilience for those frontline communities.
We want to leave you with a final thought to ponder on your own. If private investment becomes the primary engine driving global climate funding, how might investor profit motives ultimately dictate which vulnerable communities get saved first? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.